Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1998 Represent. On this episode, we're taking a look at Blade. I have actually never seen this movie. I've seen clips of it, and I knew about it and about a lot of the stuff that happens in it, but I had never seen it, so I ended up rectifying that and renting it over on Amazon Prime. It was like $3 or something to watch it. Watched it, this like past couple days ago, and really enjoyed it. We'll probably check out Blade and Blade Trinity at some point as well. I've seen clips from those movies as well, but just never have seen the full movies of those. I had known about a lot of the stuff in this movie because I remember when it came out, a friend of mine had seen it, and we were talking on like ICQ or whatever it was, and he was just saying about like all like the cool ways that basically vampires get killed in this movie. With like you have like a UV light, you have like these silver, like there's like some bullets that are silver, you have like the anticoagulant injections and all that kind of cool stuff. But got some notes here. Then we're going to just go through those notes, and then I'm going to discuss like the movie and what I thought of it, stuff like that. So let me get this open here. There we are. So first released August 21st, 1998. Apparently had a $45 million budget, but it ended up grossing like $131.2 million globally. So it was basically a box office success. It's kind of considered to be one of Wesley Snipes' signature roles. I would say like Simon Phoenix is probably in that list, as well as I'm trying to think of another great role. Simon Phoenix is probably my favorite role from him. But yeah, Simon Phoenix. You have Blade. I forget the character's name from thinking New Jack City. Some great lines in that. So this film here, definitely one of his kind of signature roles, one of his best known roles. This was considered to be one of the very first successful, or maybe even the first successful Marvel film or movie based on Marvel. It wasn't made by Marvel Studios because they didn't exist yet, but this kind of set the stage for at least immediately after this, like a couple years later, we got X-Men. A couple years after that, we got the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. We got a year after that, we got X2 or X-Men United. So it kind of set the stage for just comic book movies going forward, I think. And then it kind of set the stage for a lot of the successful Marvel films, even if they weren't necessarily being made by Marvel. So, you had Spider-Man, X-Men, and so on. So it was successful, and I think like movies before this were like I never even seen. I know there's like a really bad Fantastic Four movie. There's like a weird Captain America movie. I think there was like some made-for-TV like Spider-Man movies because I kind of vaguely remember watching some of those as a kid. But this one was the first one that was somewhat, or actually very successful, and it kind of spawned two sequels to it, as well as helping kickstart Marvel movies going forward. So pretty cool. This was written by David S. Goyer, who's also went on to write a ton of other comic book films, including a lot of the Christopher Nolan Batman films. He was on the writing teams for those. We have also Man of Steel. He wrote that, and it was directed by Stephen Norrington. I don't think he's directed a whole lot, and I think the last film that he directed was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I believe is Sean Connery's last film role, even though it was like in 2003, because I think Sean Connery retired shortly after that. I have not seen that movie, but I remember it's based on like an Alan Moore comic or something along those lines. Some interesting just kind of background on this film. Apparently, before Wesley Snipes was cast, other actors that were considered for the role were Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne for the role of Blade. Those would have just been really interesting to see how those would have panned out. Apparently, when the rights for this movie got picked up by, it wasn't New Line Cinema at first. It was some other production company. I think that it eventually got rolled into New Line or got like acquired or something like that. They wanted the movie to be done with Richard Roundtree, obviously known for playing Shaft in the Shaft films, and it was supposed to be a western set in Mexico with Richard Roundtree as Blade, and that sounds really interesting. It sounds like it. They probably obviously made the better choice of going with Wesley Snipes and going with the theme that they went with, but that just seems like It seemed like it would be a very interesting film. LL Cool J was also apparently interested in playing the role, and that was as early as like 1992. And then after kind of like I think they kind of like production stalled out or like they were just developing it, and then eventually they settled on Wesley Snipes. And I think like in some article I was reading or like just doing some research that it's basically the perfect role for Wesley Snipes anyway. Apparently Patrick McGowan, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and John Voight were also considered for the role of Whistler, who is kind of he's almost like the I don't know if he's like Alfred is not a good he's not really a butler, but he's more like Lucius Fox, I guess, if you were to compare it to the Batman films, the Nolan Batmans, where he makes a lot of blades, weapons, and technology, played by Chris Christopherson, uh, excellent in the role as well. Apparently, the original cut was not very good. It was like 140 minutes, so like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and test audiences hated it. So it basically they had to do like a lot of reshoots, change a lot of stuff, and apparently it delayed the release of the movie by like 6 months or so. So maybe it was supposed to come out like early '98 or maybe late 1997, and then test audiences just didn't like the movie, so it got bumped basically all the way to towards let me see what was it August 21st, like towards like the end of August of that year. And now we're going to just discuss the film itself. Like I said, this is my first time fully watching the movie, but I had already known about the nightclub scene and some of the cool like music and fights. But basically, it starts off in 1967. Blade's mother is bitten by a vampire like before the movie starts. Basically, there's like an emergency C-section to get him out of there, and then it jumps forward into time where we have these people going into this club, and people are just dancing, having a good time, and then the sprinklers turn on, and it's sprinkling blood, and everybody in that club is a vampire. Blade shows up on the scene, and it's just cool because you have this visual of basically a sprinkler system just spraying blood everywhere, and the vampires, of course, are like like drinking it up and what have you. Blade shows up, gets rid of some vampires with an awesome shotgun. He's got a sword. He's got these cool like machine pistols and just very cool technology and weapons to get rid of vampires. After that, it cuts to I think one guy gets burned up. It's kind of funny. This one vampire keeps showing up again and again and again, and he's like basically the villain's main henchman. But he gets burned up at one point. I mean, I may be confusing this with a different character, but he gets burned up, comes back, eventually gets his hand cut off like twice by Blade. It's kind of funny because it's kind of like comic relief in a way because he just keeps showing up and getting beaten down by Blade. But it cuts to a hospital where we're examining the blood of this person that's burned up, and it's obviously a vampire, so the blood looks different under a microscope. That vampire basically resurrects, bites one guy, and I think it bites the lady and the lady as well. She's like the kind of main. I don't really want to say sidekick, but she's basically paired up with Blade for most of the movie. But it jumps then. I think it jumps to like a council of vampires, and they're discussing some stuff. And Deacon Frost, the main villain, played by I think it's Stephen Dorff, is how it's pronounced. They're like you're kind of out of control. We've had this organization for like for however long, and you're bringing a lot of attention to us that we don't want. So there's definitely like a power struggle going on within like the like leadership of like the vampire like societies or whatever it is. Kind of reminds me a lot of like Vampire the Masquerade. I've not played the role playing game, but I've played a while ago. I think it's called Bloodlines. It's on PC. But it's like a video role playing game, and there's all these kinds of different like vampire societies where, just the whole vibe with the like council of vampires and all that, and just like the vampire like subculture as a whole in the movie remind me of that. It kind of had that same kind of feel. But after that, we get introduced to Whistler, who basically injects this lady with like a garlic solution to try to prevent her from becoming a vampire. Blade and then basically her team up kind of reluctantly. He doesn't really like want her to be around, but he ends up like showing her like some stuff and helping her out. And they basically track down this police officer. She throws or sprays him with I think Whistler called it vampire mace. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not a vampire." And Blade basically explains that he's just basically a familiar that maybe at some point, if he does what his master wants, will maybe become a full vampire at some point. They chase that guy around for a while. They go to a place. Deacon Frost at this time is doing this like computer analysis on like looks like old like scriptures, and it's got like these things translating it. So he's kind of translating this whole ancient prophecy of like the blood god returning and basically like turning the entire like world into vampires or whatever it was. It was something along those lines. But they go to this the archive, and there's a vampire there named Pearl, who basically is like the keeper of all the information. And one of the cooler didn't really I don't know if this character gets I think eventually maybe he gets killed, but they have like a UV light, and as like a way to torture this vampire. If they don't answer correctly or do something they don't like, they just turn this UV light on. The lady's shining it on him, and basically it's like burning him up. It's kind of a cool way to like. I think eventually the character did get killed because he got, but it was just basically like burning him as like a way to torture him. It was pretty interesting. I'm not condoning torture, but it was cool in this movie. They get a bunch of information from them about the whole like prophecy and all that, and then we basically cut to I think Blade is then having to constantly take this serum to keep the hunger at bay because he's like basically they call him a daywalker, so he's part vampire. And part of Stephen Dorff's plans is he needs Blade alive to get his blood because his blood is the key to the whole prophecy thing. But at some point, basically, it's revealed to the lady that Blade is a vampire, and they eventually start going, trying to figure out what's going on, maybe a way to prevent that from happening, but also a way to kind of stop this whole prophecy from going on. And one of the other cool scenes is Deacon Frost takes one of the other vampire like council members like outside because the pure blood vampire, so they can't be around sunlight. He basically like yanks his fangs out and then just lets him sit like it's like there's like a sunrise happening. So basically just like puts him outside in the sunrise and gets completely like destroyed. It's a really cool scene with that as well. Special effects are actually for 1998 standards are actually pretty good in this as well. There's some cool like blood effects where like blood stuff that's exploding. People are getting injected with the anticoagulant stuff and they're like exploding as well. I think there's like when they get shot with the shotgun, like Blade has, I think it has silver in it. They kind of like disintegrate, and some of those effects they definitely looked a little bit dated, but they still looked pretty good overall. But eventually, in a twist that I did not see coming in this movie, is basically they get into Frost goes to Whistler, ends up like killing Whistler, or almost killing Whistler. Whistler basically makes Blade give him his gun and he shoots himself with that. I kind of knew about the Whistler part because I think my friend had told me about that, and so he basically is sliced up and is like, hey, like, you better like give me your gun and walk away, and then Whistler just shoots himself to stop becoming a vampire. But eventually, then they go to where Frost is having this ceremony. It's like this like ancient like tower. There's all these glyphs around it, and they have a bunch of other vampires there that are basically like witnessing it as well. And they're constantly saying, like, hey, like, don't kill Blade because I need him alive because they need his blood specifically for this one thing. But Blade gets in there and then goes into a room. I think it's basically supposed to be Deacon Frost's bedroom because you see it earlier in the movie. But the bed opens up and somebody pops out of it, and it's actually his mother, which I was like, I did not see that twist coming. And it was pretty cool because apparently Deacon Frost is the one that bit her initially back in like 1967. And now he's kind of just like hanging out with her, and she's a vampire. She's like, I like doing the vampire stuff. So, I really enjoy this. So like, you should just like help us out. Do it like, she's basically saying like, give into like to the dark side basically. But they basically, and one thing I thought was going to happen because Blade gets put in this like weird sarcophagus like thing where it's cutting his wrists, draining his blood into like a bowl, and it's going into and it's eventually filtering down into this chamber. I thought maybe they were going to take the anticoagulant and like she was going to like pour that into Blade's blood and just have that go down on the vampires, but that's not exactly what happened. So like she rescues Blade. She's like, hey, like you need strength, like bite me, drink some of my blood, and that'll like give you strength. So he does that. Then he jumps down, and one of the like a really amazing fight with some awesome techno music goes on. Blade takes out a bunch of the other vampires, and like the ceremony or the ritual starts happening, and the glyphs start like electrifying, and they start shocking some of the vampires. Stephen Dorff's character gets all of the gets hit with that as well, and then you never see the Blood God come up, but I think maybe the Blood God then is like residing inside Stephen Dorff's character. So I think like the plan was maybe for him to become that, maybe. But he fights Blade in one cool scene. Blade slices him in half, and you see his Deacon Frost body, like his torso, like separates, and then you just see it go back down and like reconnect. And Blade is like, what the hell? I can't really say what he actually said, but he's like, or it's silent, and I think he just mouths it. But he basically is like, well, this is like how it is, and so they keep fighting, and then eventually Blade takes the anticoagulant darts and just like kind of like throws like 5 or 6 of them at Deacon Frost, and he just explodes. So that's kind of basically like what happens in the film. It shows at the end of the film, Blade shows up in Moscow, gonna fight more vampires and what have you. But I really enjoyed it. It was like I said, I not picked it up, rented it on Amazon. Amazon Prime was like $3. I think it was streaming. I don't know if it is streaming anymore, or if it is, it's streaming on a service like that I don't currently have a subscription with. So I've just got it from Amazon, but had a blast watching it. The music is awesome. It's just great, kind of like a techno kind of soundtrack. I don't know why didn't see this back when it came out. I remember like the theater is like on the other side of the county, and I remember getting to that theater back then was kind of a pain because you'd have to take a bus from one town to another. It was like an hour each way or something. So going to movies, I didn't do it as much back then. But and then I kind of don't know why I didn't ever see it after like on DVD or anything like that. Just one of those movies that I knew existed. I knew it was good and a lot of fun, but just never got around to watching it. So one thing I really do like about this series is stuff that I maybe missed back then. I'm getting to watch and or rewatch in some cases. So really glad I rented this on Amazon. If you're into that kind of movie, I would definitely recommend it. That's going to do it for now. We'll be back again in a few days. We'll probably be doing another video game. I think we'll be doing Half-Life. So like one of the big major games of 1998. We'll be doing a video for Half-Life probably next in a few days. But that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back again with that Half-Life video pretty soon. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.